Hi, welcome back to another episode of Analyzed Scripts. Today we are so excited to finally be talking about Succession.
Oh, finally. Oh, finally.
Succession Season 1, which is on HBO Max. Huge show for them, like big time. Their last season is currently being released right now, every Sunday, I think.
Right, I think every Sunday. And we are, such journalists that we are watching all 4 seasons this month, and we will be releasing 1 episode a week per season every other week with some movies and other things thrown in. But boy, oh boy, I don't know how I've been sleeping on this show. It's so good.
I know. I have had so many people personally, and then even on our Instagram page, be like, you need to do Succession. You need to do Succession. And I really will say, at first, I didn't think I was going to like it.
Me too. The first 2 to 3 episodes, I was like, oh, snooze.
Yeah, it feels a little dry. Feels like a business, small political.
Yeah, a lot of navy and black and a lot of like boring.
Yes.
And it also just left me feeling icky right away. Like, this is capitalism, and like, I don't really need to see this any more than I already suffer the consequences of capitalism,
Yeah, so I can say, and we're not going to talk about season 2, but now I'm like, I just finished season 2 and I'm obsessed with this. I really am trying to slowly watch it because it's so good and pick up on all the characters and all the storylines and all of the kind of like real life things. I was thinking kind of automatically in the first couple episodes when I wasn't that into it was like, okay, in real life, like who owns what, right? Like, this is a big conglomerate of a media corporation, and you see that a couple people like own everything.
Yeah.
So we were both kind of saying it reminds us of like Disney and who owns Disney and all of the things that they do. Their Hulu partnerships, Discovery partnerships,
ESPN.
Yep.
Lucasfilms with like Star Wars, how there's the theme parks, the cruise lines.
Right.
And I kept wondering, like, is this based on some big time media family?
Right.
I didn't get a chance to look into that, but Portia, I think you looked up some interesting facts.
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, there are about 15 billionaires and 6 corporations who own most of the U.S. media outlets.
Oh.
So the biggest ones are AT&T, Comcast, the Walt Disney Company, National Amusements, which includes Viacom, CBS, News Corp, and Fox Corporation, which are both owned by the Murdochs. Not the same Murdochs who are the Murdaws.
From that South Carolina documentary. Not those ones, but the other ones.
Yeah.
It's a toss-up.
It's a similar name, you know? It's an interesting name. So I thought that was interesting. And then Sony and Hearst, I guess, are smaller.
Okay,
but,
okay. Wow. So that's kind of like, I feel unwell learning that like so much of the media that we see is owned by like a handful, 2 handfuls of people.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you thought, Portia, but as a psychiatrist, I was really fascinated by the family dynamics. And I was so thrilled when they showed them doing family therapy at the end, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But just getting a sense of like, what are these long-standing dynamics that are really coming out as we see Logan, the patriarch of the family, maybe retiring, but maybe not, and like, who's going to get the company, right?
Right.
So Logan has 4 children. I kept wondering, like, what is their birth order? Did you figure this out? I think Connor is the oldest, and I wonder if he has a different mom. I get the sense he does.
I think he does.
Because he's kind of more aloof. And then we have the 3 other children, Kendall, Roman, and Siobhan. I kept wondering if Roman and Siobhan were twins, or I think Kendall's second oldest and like the first oldest of his nuclear family. And then Roman and Shiv, I couldn't figure out like who's third, who's fourth. Are they twins?
I feel like they are probably very close in age, if anything. I got the vibe that Roman was younger, but I think it's just
that's
his personality,
right,
and maybe like a defense mechanism that he uses. But yeah, I think it's definitely like a patriarchy family. Logan, it seems like, came from nothing and kind of started this entire company himself, so has a very different like view of the world than his kids do. I mean, in the wealth depiction is extreme. Right. Like, this is You
This
are
is
only
it.
flying private. You
Right.
have 20 homes. You
Call in a
you
helicopter
don't
when you
pour
need
water
it.
for yourself
I
ever. I
know.
mean, it's like it's not. You're doing
It's
well.
unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is crazy, crazy rich. And again, probably on par with the
Yeah,
families who own these
totally.
media companies.
Like I think that he still, to a degree, like has an awareness of the world that his children do not. Like
Right.
that they are kind of silver spoon fed,
Right.
and have really no regard in a lot of ways
I
for
know.
people. I mean, the baseball scene, right?
Ah,
It made
so
me
disgusting.
I felt sick.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Me too. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this
Yeah,
show.
yes, because it was
That's-
early on, and I was
yeah.
like, I don't like this.
That was disgusting
Yeah.
what Roman did with that little boy. And then you see them paying them off.
Yep.
And you see that a lot throughout
Yep.
season 1 is when they've, had bad behavior. They pay people off, get them to sign an NDA. I thought Kendall really hit the nail on the head, sort of like midway through season 1 when he was telling his dad, like, you're so jealous of what you've given your children. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So these are people who are like uber wealthy. Like that's not even, they're in like a different stratosphere. They all have these like insane apartments in New York City. Then
Huge egos. No awareness.
No, very limited awareness. Even like at first I thought Shiv might have some. And then as we got to the end, I was like, no, not her. No.
I feel that way back and forth with everyone. And one of the characters that I don't feel that much like he is just out of this world is Kendall. And I'm wondering if it's because of his substance use issues. I feel like that really humanizes him for me.
Yeah.
And maybe whether it's through, I don't know if he's had any substance abuse treatment or...
it sounds like he's been to rehab a time or two.
And even like his fellow, substance use comrades. Like I think... So it's just something that affects everyone regardless of your socioeconomic status. So I think I don't know if that gives him just some little extra viewpoint of the world that I don't think anyone else appears to have of his siblings.
Yeah, no, probably. I think, you hit the nail on the head. It does humanize him. I was so sad when he relapsed. And I was really sad he relapsed with Smirnoff and then like went right to meth. I was like, oh, wow, it's really ratcheting up like very quickly. And that is a good point, Portia, that substance abuse can affect anyone from all walks of life. And actually the rates are higher in licensed professionals compared to the general population, which most people are like shocked to find out. That's something I used to tell a lot of people when I'd see them in the ER and maybe they're a fellow mental health worker or a doctor or an attorney or a social worker or a teacher or physical therapist or what have you, that the rates of substance abuse are higher in people who hold some sort of professional license. So it isn't that, more education, more socioeconomic resources necessarily shield you from that. And I think we see a lot of that in like teenagers who maybe grow up in really affluent communities with less supervision. Like I'm imagining these four had growing up. I don't know. I just wonder, like what their attachments were like to anyone. Like, did they have a nanny or
they must have had nannies,
something that they felt connected to? We haven't met that person yet. And
I don't think, I mean, in my opinion, based on me making up their childhoods, I feel like they probably didn't have as good as a attachment they could have with a nanny. And maybe it's because nannies were fired regularly or like there was a high turnover because, the expectations were so unreasonable. Because I know people who have nannies and, au pairs come in have a strongly attached childhoods and, can be, don't turn into kind of how this family is. And then other families who have au pairs and nannies do.
Right. And I would imagine that the mom, who we don't meet till the end, I kept wondering, like, where's the mom? Where's the mom?
What is she like?
Yes, I thought that was an important choice not to show her right until the wedding. I bet that's just how she's related to all the kids the whole time. But, so I bet like, this is what I'm imagining their childhoods were. They're like living in a castle or whatever, very fancy place in New York City. Dad is working all the time, doesn't really care about them, except as sort of like bolstering his own image. And then mom, I don't think would have worked, but also probably wasn't like hands-on or invested in them. And so they probably did have nannies. But I would imagine that then mom maybe felt competitive with the nanny and would like fire her, or, if the kids did start to grow attached to the nanny and not her, I could see that creating issues and leading to a lot of different caretakers coming in and out, which I don't think is good for the kids.
Right.
That's my hypothesis about, what their upbringing was like. I have no idea if we'll see any more backstory to that or not, but they all certainly are displaying traits, at least, of various personality disorders in the cluster B range.
Yeah.
From, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder to antisocial personality disorder.
Well, I guess who should we start with? Do we want to just maybe like quickly, we talked a little bit about Kendall. Anything else you want to add? So it seems like he's separated or divorced from his wife.
I think they're separating.
Yes, you're right. Yep, because they talk about it later at the wedding.
So at first, I hated him. Like the first couple episodes, I just hated him. I thought he was such a douchebag. Like, sorry to use that word, but I think he is. And the way he's like so rude and aggressive to all the business people. Yeah. Like maybe that's how business is done. I don't know. I don't do business. But he was so rude and gross and vulgar. And he really like thought really highly of himself and would get so offended when someone would mention like, do you want to call your dad, or should we run this by your dad? Which is like the only reson he's in that position.
I love when he said back though to one of them, do you want to call your dad?
Yeah.
I was like, that's funny.
So at first I hated him. And then as I saw the dynamic between Kendall and his dad play out, I felt so sad for him.
Yeah.
And then I just got chills thinking of the final scenes after, so they're at the wedding. He's trying to get drugs. He like goes for a ride with a waiter or something. And he's the one driving. And he even says like, it's been a long time since I drove. And the waiter's like,
and they're
why?
on the other side of the
side of the road, right? Because I think they're in somewhere in England.
Yep.
And the waiter's like, oh, really? Like, why? And he's like, well, I'm like insanely wealthy, so people usually drive me around. And then again, the car accident, the guy dies and he leaves and like.
And he tried to go back twice, so I counted.
Yes.
Because I thought that was like an important moment. Like,
yeah.
He did demonstrate some empathy and compassion and regard for humanness or humanity.
Shame and regret.
Dove back 2 times to try to get to him. It appears like it's cold. I mean, this isn't pleasant. It's life or death. And then he kind of comes to realize that he can't get to him. And just, I mean, then I thought it was interesting because he kind of then immediately like shuts down. You know, he like walks back. He's just like, he gets inside. He takes that bath.
Oh my God.
Cleans off.
He has to like break in to get inside because he lost his room key. That was just so chilling, that whole portrayal. But I thought it would like spot on portrayal of what it must feel like to be in shock. Yeah. And just sort of going through the motions and trying to cover your ass by like showing up to the after party and the brunch the next day and all this stuff. I was kind of surprised that the authorities or his dad or whoever was able to piece together that he was there by his room key. I was like, would they really find the room key? Like, whatever. So they did.
And, right. And like, why was it his room key? Why wasn't it just like a room key to the house that like somebody who was working right at the property had? Like, that seems like strange that they...
Right. That seems like a detail that like, I don't know how realistic that is, but okay, fine. We'll give it to you. And then the way the dad uses that so masterfully.
So as soon as that happened and like I just assumed that this person was dead, and as he's kind of walking home, I was like, this is
gonna
how
happen.
His dad gets him back under his thumb.
100%. So again, to sort of recap the plot, if it's been a while since you watched season 1 or if you haven't watched it yet. So his dad, Logan, is... the first episode, like about to announce he's retiring, Kendall's going to take over. And then at the last minute, he's like, I changed my mind. I'm going to stay on. And he like really crushes Kendall's dreams. Then he has the medical issue. Yes, he has like a hemorrhagic stroke, which I thought they portrayed really well and accurately. At first, I thought the dad was faking it. I thought he was what we say malingering is like the fancy psychology word for sort of feigning symptoms for secondary gain. Like I really thought he was faking it at first because all the kids were bickering about like who's going to be CEO, who's going to be CEO,
and them changing the trust for Marsha. That was interesting, and they were kind of all trying to fight her.
Right,
on that.
And then eventually eventually he like gets back to work and quote unquote recovers, even though he was like not ready, purely to like keep Kendall from taking the reins, it seems like. So the whole season you see this like push and pull between him and Kendall. And then eventually Kendall like tries to,
hostile takeover,
this bear hug, all these business words I don't understand, but basically try to like use the shareholders to like vote him out. Like they try to do the vote.
Yep.
Remember?
Oh my gosh.
We'll talk about that in a minute. And then eventually, like, as the dad learned about this, like, hostile takeover, it was, like, going okay. And then Kendall's another good example of, like, always getting in your own way, right? Like, he just keeps getting in his own way, telling Frank when he shouldn't, like, trusting this person when you shouldn't, like, going out to score drugs the night before the hostile takeover meeting, and then it all gets foiled. And so his dad learns about the fact that he was at the crash site and basically is like, come back and work with me and I'll take care of it.
Yeah. And he really becomes, you just think that he's going to be his dad's like right-hand man. He does whatever I say now. He's going to take the fall for this. He's going to do this.
And it wasn't even for me, Portia, like the fact that he would use that against him. It was the fact that that was the only moment we saw the dad have any type of affection for Kendall, giving him a hug, saying like, you're my first boy, I love you. And it was all manipulative. There was like not an ounce of authenticity there. It was so disgusting to me. And then
so Kendall like pairs with, it seems like a college buddy, Stewie. And Stewie's in like a private investment firm. And then, Kendall tries to get Stewie to kind of buy and help with the board, because I guess Stewie has votes. Again, this is not my area.
All this like
forte,
business where like shares and stocks, and I'm all like, I really don't understand. This must be what people feel like when we say medicine and psychology words.
Yeah, all the 3-letter,
all the
acronyms over and over again. We could just use them.
Yeah, it was like, okay.
But Kendall, I think is, I think he just adds a really helpful, humanistic flavor to the show.
You definitely see his humanity. And so I did look up some facts about Jeremy Strong, who's the actor who plays Kendall, because I'd heard his name in the news and like, like celebrity media news, not like hard-hitting news, I don't think. And I just thought it was interesting that he's the one who is really into method acting. So like when he's playing a character, he like lives as the character. And like if you read a little bit about Succession, which I'm trying to avoid, but some of his other castmates say it can be hard to work with because he's like always the character. And he's married to a psychiatrist, which I thought was really interesting.
Love that for him.
Yeah. And I think there were some things on his Wikipedia page or something where either he or she was talking about how it can be hard because he'll have this identity diffusion was the phrase they used. How
that's wild.
Right? I thought that was fascinating. And I'm like seeing it though, like in his acting being so shocked and like, but can you imagine being his wife and having to live with him, living as Kendall? Ew,
because Kendall is so desperate for connection and intimacy and for his father specifically to validate him. And I think that he, though, by doing that, like pushes everyone away and becomes really isolated and is often, I think, really lonely.
I think so too. Yeah. And the expense of his children, right? So that scene at, was it Thanksgiving?
Yep. It's pretty, it's only a couple episodes in. That was shocking to me. So they're at Thanksgiving. Everyone's invited. It seems like pretty uncomfortable.
I love though. It was like such a typical uncomfortable family holiday.
Yeah, like they're like, this is the norm. So Tom appears to this be like a first holiday with Shiv because he's like shocked. He's like, why don't we go around the table and say thanks? Which again is like such a normal,
and Tom's
regular
like,
person thing.
Yeah, Tom's like this like good old Midwestern boy who's like marrying Shiv. Right. I still get the icks from him right away. One of my first 3 notes in my notes app as I was watching this was Tom gross. So I just have this feeling he's going to be a surprise sociopath at the end.
We'll see.
But yeah, so they're going around and everyone's kind of like, they're just so mean to him.
Yeah.
They really like put down everyone who's not like in their family.
Right.
So gross.
Right. So Logan, who, this is a brief character, but Logan's brother, Ewan, who's like very anti-capitalist, politics flavor
He's
that
also
Logan is.
like anti like technology.
Yeah,
he like lives out in the boonies alone and wants to be left alone, but he's still like on the board.
Yep.
And so has a vote and like shows up at key moments.
And it's unclear if he had an early important role, because I think it's like, if he didn't, why does he have, it seems like hundreds of millions of dollars as well? Like he's very, 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 very wealthy. He has board seats. So I'm wondering, like, did Logan and Ewan start something and then Ewan got really, got out really fast and Logan bought him out and so on? Because like Logan, maybe yes, like he would. I just don't think he would give his brother hundreds of millions
for like
of dollars.
no reason. Let's make a pact here now, Portia, that like when this podcast takes off, we won't turn into Logan and Ewan.
Yeah.
Okay, pinky promise.
Yeah. Or Shiv or
any of them.
Roman.
Any of them.
Greg, maybe. But
I love Greg. We'll get to him in a second. He's like the best. But
so back to Thanksgiving.
So again, this is where Logan, so he has like a hemorrhagic stroke. Like a lot of people die from this. Very serious. Again, I loved the scenes of them like in the hospital.
Yes, we want the best care.
Dictating care.
Where do we need to go?
I have this neurologist on the phone. And this happens.
Oh, totally.
Oh my God, it totally happens.
They're in a special wing.
Special wing. They have a special like boardroom. This happens. But also, but anyway, so then like we see Logan like coming back to work, mostly to like screw Kendall.
Yeah, he pees in the office. He doesn't know where he is a couple times.
There's a couple of things where with stuff like that, like the peeing in the office when he like grabs Siobhan's hand when she goes in to see him and like moves it toward his crotch.
Oh, yeah.
Some parts where you're like, are you confused and delirious or is this deliberate? I thought the thing with Siobhan was confusion and delirium, but the peeing in Kendall's office, I was not sure. I feel like that was deliberate.
Oh, because it was Kendall's. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that was deliberate, but he knew he could like get a pass, maybe? I don't know. It seemed like if it had been anyone else's office, I might think it's more just confusion. But I think he just had a way of like building Kendall up to shut him down like at the last moment. I think he really enjoyed that, which grossed me out. But then getting back to Thanksgiving. So they're playing this game where they pass around this like cranberry sauce or something.
Yeah, and I think it's like you just have to remember
going to the market.
Right. So I'm going to the market for a can of beans, and you say I'm going to the market for a can of beans and turkey. Right. And then I have to say, both of those.
It's like one of those like games you used to play at camp. I also loved, sidebar, that they kept bringing him the cranberry sauce in the can. Like everyone knew he loved that. It's just so weird. You would think that would humanize him, but no, it doesn't. And then the little boy who, this was Kendall's son, right? Who like had a hard time transitioning in. And so I felt like the mom was doing a good job, like sitting with him, trying to make him feel comfortable to bring him in. And then like Logan was getting so irate over it. Logan, like definitely, I think parents like, you say what I
do. With an iron fist.
Yeah, you do what I say no matter what.
Authoritarian.
Yes, authoritarian for sure. And I think Kendall's maybe trying to do it differently, but this is definitely where you see the pull. And then the little boy tells Logan, like, you're doing it wrong or you're getting it wrong. And he
like, you lost or something.
And he hits him in the face with that can, like really quick, really hard. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I felt so uncomfortable watching that.
I think I audibly gasped.
Me too.
Because it was so out of left field. Like,
right.
And I think you didn't know in that moment specifically, like, is this a lingering symptom of the stroke,
right.
or has he done this before?
Right. And I think he's done it before. But
I thought horrible.
It was horrific to watch. Just awful. I feel so bad for that little boy. But then even then, Kendall like still like doesn't fully stand up for his kids. I don't know. I just, he's like still so torn
it's
between
like he
that and his dad.
in probably to the best ability that he can.
But
like,
he can't fully.
Right, he can't.
I keep wondering, like, why don't they all just like take their bazillions of dollars and get out of there?
I don't know if it's all like a majority is tied up in trust,
the company or something.
The company, whereas in like if Logan wanted to say you're all cut off, like he could, you know what I mean?
Right,
like maybe they would have nothing. It's which is just such also like a power move.
Right. I think you're totally right.
So anyway, I think Kendall, I enjoyed his storyline throughout the show. I think it was sad, but I really I think it helped me get into the show.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really sad he relapsed. And then like when Logan would want Greg, who's like this cousin who came out of nowhere. So I loved like at the beginning episodes when Greg is like the mascot at the theme park.
And he throws up through the eyes.
Like,
I was like, oh.
yeah. And he's like talking to his mom on the phone. Like, I didn't smoke. I was just in the car.
I know. It just smelled. I don't know.
I don't know if the contact high. I can't tell you how many times, Portia, I would work in the ER and people would come in high as kites and we would say their urine toxicology screen is lighting up like a Christmas tree, which means everything's positive. And I literally would hear this all the time. Mm-hmm. But I didn't do it. It was just someone in the car. And it's like, that's not how it works.
I know.
We all know that's not how it works.
I was in
this isn't
program where we did in-home family therapy for teens with primary like substance use. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm like, why was I doing this? It's just like it's a funny part of like the job. So I would bring in, the little bottle or the little container for them to do like a urine sample. And they would go into the bathroom. And then I'm thinking too, like, they'd like hand it to me.
Ew.
This isn't like a clinical setting where it's like we have gloves and we're doing this thing.
And then you put it in that little like shelf thing in the bathroom. And then you have gloves on.
A test, a nurse or someone else then who's running the test is like
puts it in the bag.
Properly. Like, no, it was just like, so then I'd like wash my hands and obviously had piles of hand sanitizer everywhere. But, and like I remember it just saying, multiple pretty significant substances. It was not marijuana.
Right.
It was very much
like
of
PCP
things for a 15-year-old to be doing.
Right.
And them just denying it. And I'm like, but it says it's on here.
Denial is very strong in substance use disorders. Yeah. It's the primary defense
especially
mechanism.
in just teen life, right? Like,
like
why wasn't there?
Teenager,
it's like, well, I have a picture of you there. Well, that's not me. It's like, but it's your face. Yeah. So like, I don't know what to tell you.
It is.
Yeah. So Greg is, I love him. I think he's like the comic relief because he's just like, ba-dum, kind of walking around.
He's like, this cousin Greg comes out of nowhere. Somehow the sister, I think, is Logan's sister, maybe? Or no, the sister is Ewan's daughter.
Yes.
That's how it is.
Yep.
And there's some family rift there, which I wonder if we'll learn more about later on. But he's so funny. He's like, Mom, with me. Like, Barbara, I have no money. Like, bail me out. She's like, no, I'm done. Mm-hmm. Like, go see your uncle and he'll give you a job or something. Yeah. And he shows up like right before Logan has this stroke and he's like trying to like get a job.
And just the way he talks, like he's just... I don't even know.
Sweet. I like him. I also think he's smart. So I was really happy for him when Tom, who's Shiv's now husband, like the good old boy from the Midwest, who I don't think is all that good of a boy, asked Greg to destroy all those documents that would basically implicate the company and like some kind of awful cover-ups through the years. And Greg was smart enough to keep some. I was like, yes, Greg. Yes, Greg. And I wonder, I'm betting that'll come out in later seasons. And like, you can see how Greg is like kind of doofy as he comes across, does have that like smart side to him. And like Logan picks that up at some points and is like,
Yeah. Did you see, or obviously you did because you watched it, when they went to the restaurant, so Tom and Greg, and he's like introducing them to like fine dining.
And Greg was like, oh, I want to go to California Pizza Kitchen. And I was like, I loved that place in like med school. Like, yeah.
And California Pizza Kitchen is delicious.
It's delicious. But then Tom like is like, oh, I can't go to California Pizza Kitchen.
But Greg has already had dinner with Ewan and a lot. And because Ewan is like, you got to eat it all. There's so much waste. You can't do that. So Greg has this like huge noodle dish and then goes to this fine dining, which I will say at fine dining, when you are doing a tasting menu, it is really small. And it's supposed to be like a bite of each. Like maybe you could get away with that. But still, he seems really full.
But they eat like a sparrow or something.
And they had to cover themselves because it's like illegal. And I was like,
but did they really? Or was Tom doing that to
I don't know.
To be kind of like a sociopath? Like,
I was like, oh yeah, like you have to do this because it's this rare bird that
but then
no one can see.
Everyone else around the restaurant can see. They're not like in a back room.
We should look that up. Is this
or
a thing?
If you're listening and send us a DM.
Yeah.
But that's where I think Tom really enjoys getting one over on Greg. Like right away, you see that when he they're at that weird baseball thing. And remember? Yeah. And I wonder, is he just with Shiv to marry into this family? I wouldn't be surprised. And then we have Shiv.
Yeah. So
beautiful redhead.
Interesting. I don't know what to think of her.
I don't know how to place her.
Yeah.
Right? Also, she's always in a pantsuit. And I just keep thinking, like, aren't you so uncomfortable all day wearing a pantsuit?
But you know what? They're probably the most tailored,
That's true.
perfect fit you've
Like
ever
silk
worn.
or like whatever fancy.
Not tight around the waist.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm just like, can
Yeah.
someone do that for me?
But they're all in suits all the time. And I'm just like, don't you just want to put on a t-shirt, Like, but they don't.
Yeah, even when, so I think, I don't know why I'm just thinking of Roman here, but like he's often, to me, appears the most dressed down. And
Yes.
he's in
Still
pants and rolled dress shirt
Right,
sleeves.
right.
But he looks the most relaxed versus like a
Casual.
full suit, not
Right.
rolled sleeves.
Right. Like Kendall always has like a new dry clean suit every day.
Mhm.
Rowan's like in his suit, but it's rolled up.
Yeah.
He's doing like working out in his office. Remember when he masturbated like at the in the beginning when he was made COO and he's like in his office and he masturbates like all over the window and like barely cleans it up because he knows someone else will. That's so gross.
He's a strange cat.
Well, that's like a really polite way of saying it, Portia.
I don't know where to place him. So let's go back to Shiv. Let's
Okay.
go back to Shiv.
I know we're like jumping all around, but it's hard not to.
So Shiv, I don't know what to place. Like specifically way more than Roman. Like I just feel like she
was a surprise.
I like her, I don't like her. I like
Yeah.
her, I don't like her. She does something that I'm like, huh. And she does something that makes me feel bad.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Like until episode like 7 probably or 8,
mhm.
I was like, okay, she's the only like quote unquote normal one, or she's like the only one with a whiff of a moral compass, wanting to go into politics and seemingly to like root for the guy who's fighting for the common man and wanting to maybe break away from the family in that way, but feels like she can't fully, probably like you're saying, because she might get cut off or something. She's with Tom, who's not like a snobby, fancy guy, like sort of a normal guy. So you're thinking, okay, like maybe she's like the most well-adjusted. But then we see, again, I think like even her being with Tom is like fueling her narcissistic ego.
Yeah.
Like, look, I'm such a good person. I'm with this normal guy.
I have a stable relationship,
Right.
Per her.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of the guy's name that she is like very, very, very flirty with and also like masturbates with.
Yeah.
He works for Gil.
Right.
I can't remember.
It's really attractive, whatever his name is. It seems like they'd had a fling or something in the past.
Yeah. They were like past coworkers / F buddies.
Right. And then like now she's engaged. I think he's engaged and they're working together under this campaign for Gil and they're like really toeing the line and then they cross it.
Yeah.
And it like keeps happening. Like even at her wedding, he's like grabbing her and all this stuff. And it was really sad when Greg tried to bring it to Tom's attention. And you could tell Tom just like didn't want to hear it.
And when I was really sad for Tom when she kind of dropped the bomb at the wedding night that she wanted like an open marriage.
After the wedding, like at the reception, they're up in the room. And he's like, I wish you would have told me that before.
Right. Like I think
and when Tom was like, but I do love you.
I know. And like I don't want that.
Right.
And then he kind of agrees because I think he
feels like he has to.
And
there's
like
no choice.
what guy maybe, and this is being a little bit like stereotypical, right? Like he's the guy not wanting an open relationship, right? Like what guy wouldn't want that?
Right. Yeah, like at his
like
bachelor party, he felt like he had to do something, but then he was like calling her like, okay, is this okay? Is this not okay? Like, and then Roman brings the girl.
Yeah. Yep. She doesn't know how to have a stable, secure relationship,
an authentic relationship, right? People are objects, I think, to her, which we often see with narcissism. But I think she maintains this like air of morality and plays the martyr or the victim a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And
I think as a whole, I think what's interesting to remember is like you almost can't not be a narcissist in this family to survive, right? Like you have to be. It's like, I think sometimes, right, genes versus our environment, it's like this is a norm in this family. And also I think to a degree, like at this level of wealth,
yes,
maybe.
Yes. And also I think sociopathy goes right along with that. Like at that level of wealth and power, you've screwed people over.
Yep.
Like there's no way around it. And this show, maybe we won't get to fully talk about it today, but I think you see the difference between overt and covert narcissism depicted really nicely. Like I think Shiv is more of a covert narcissist. And also I think, we often think of narcissists as being like the person taking up all the air in the room, really gregarious and outgoing, talking about themselves all the time, really charming. But a lot of times, even when they're more of a covert kind of flavor and they're more passive and things like that, the real inner wound is just this intense feeling of insecurity and almost like nothingness unless you're able to put someone else down to keep yourself up. And I feel like Shiv is really demonstrating that, even with like this guy who we can't remember his name, and Tom, kind of playing them off each other to sort of feel wanted by a man, and she probably doesn't feel wanted by her dad.
So now
and then her mom
and Tom like isn't enough to fill that void because like she needs to do some inner child work, if that's possible. But like she needs it to get it from even other people. Like she can't tolerate it. And this is like a new marriage, relatively new relationship. Maybe they've been dating for years, but like you're not in your 10th year where you're trying to spice things up and you're like, hey, let's try like this. Like it just seems so strange. And when she tells it, like it's bizarre. It seems like maybe she's freaked out that she's like locked in and she's like, we're gonna have an open marriage and that's fine. What do you mean? That's weird, right? Like we have this working partnership and we just maybe will sleep with others. Like and
he's like,
she's like manipulating or gaslighting him to think it's normal.
Very different from the polyamory we saw depicted in You, season 3 with Sherry and Carrie, which had some like boundaries and forethought and openness and dialogue and God, I miss Sherry and Carrie right about now.
So let's talk about Roman.
Oh my God, we need a whole like bonus episode for Roman.
Roman to me is so projective, so defensive, so provocative that it's like so obvious that he's so wounded.
And he displays being an abuse victim so well. Like when they're at that vote and he's like trying to put his hand up and the dad says something, you just see him flinch. Like those flinches, the downcast eyes, like being so scared around his dad. Really, really giving me chills spot on depiction of a child who's been abused by this parent and is now around him a lot. And like tries to give off this like, like go with the flow, like whatever persona, but like totally is terrified all the time. A lot of acting out like outwardly instead of the substance use, which you kind of think of as like acting out inwardly.
And I could see him as a child being like awkward, quirky, like maybe he has ADHD, like
I think he does have ADHD. I really do.
Being punished relentlessly for it. Like sit down, no, like maybe getting hit versus like 100%. Kendall, I feel like could maybe be quiet more, tolerate being quiet more. Shiv can tolerate being quiet more. Still. But I don't think Roman can. And I feel like that to me maybe 100%. Is why he seems so much more like abused in different ways.
He does, doesn't he? And then the whole thing about like the dog cage that came out, like, do you remember that?
Remind me.
Oh my God.
I blocked it out
because it's awful. So at the bachelor party for Tom, somehow it comes out that like a game, quote unquote, they used to play as kids was Kendall would lock Roman in a dog crate and like feed him out of like a doggy dish. And like Roman has like held on to this forever. And I think that's probably part of like the deep-seated resentment and competitiveness they have.
I definitely
it's just terrible detail. And then like at the bachelor party, Kendall's like going around and even asked Connor, like, yeah, he enjoyed that game, right? It was a game, right? Like Kendall can't believe that he was participating in something that wasn't like being enjoyable for him. And then Connor says, well, Dad would make you do it. He would watch. That's probably why you blocked it out, because that is so dark, but totally tracks, doesn't it?
Yes. Yep.
And again, that's why I think Kendall's older than Roman, I think is...
And Shiv's a girl. I think she's, still getting the same flavor. She's still in the same family, but I think there is a tiny thread that's like the size of a strand of hair difference for that, where she's still like a daughter versus a son.
Yes, he doesn't feel, Logan, I don't think feels as competitive with her because she's a girl. He probably also is very misogynistic and so doesn't think much of girls. Yeah. So he doesn't think she can really go toes with him. But yeah, Roman, I go back and forth between like like vomiting on the TV when he's on screen because his behavior is so atrocious, and then feeling so sad for him. So sad.
Yeah.
And like, I do think he has ADHD and probably borderline personality disorder, as he said.
Yeah.
And like, why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah. I'm really, interested, excited, nervous to see where his storyline goes throughout the show. But
he's just always saying like the most provocative, uncomfortable things. And I think that's because that's how he feels inside all the time.
There was some really small sprinkle of info that we got about his sex life in season 1.
With the first girlfriend who he like broke up with, because I don't think they like had sex a lot,
right. And so she was like, this isn't, why don't we, like, this isn't even a real relationship or something like that.
Yeah,
she makes that comment of like, we're not even breaking up because we never were even together. Like we would never have sex. So I'm curious about
his impotence, right? Like, I think a lot of these men feel really impotent around their dad, Logan. And in that way, it's like really concrete, so that is an interesting detail. And then when he brings the girl that Tom like hooked up.
Oh, yeah.
And again, just like the detail that like, she gave him a blowjob and then like.
She redistributed his body fluid to him.
And he swallowed it.
So it was not cheating because
it stayed in his body.
It stayed in his body.
And he kept trying to be like, what? It's a thing. It's a thing.
And everyone
do.
Was like, that's like really
that's like not a thing.
Strange for that to occur, I would say. And this is not a judgment on people who practice this, but like I feel like it's more strange to have the exchange of fluids that way than the actual blowjob. Right? Like at the party, like, it was a bachelor party. I am personally not pleased by that behavior. But then also, it seems like that extra layer was like, that to me was like, what?
Whoa. And I also could imagine him being shocked. Like maybe she came in for a kiss and then he was like, like, what do I do now? But I just loved when he was trying to be like, that's a thing. That's a thing, guys, too.
Everyone was like, no. But, no. So then we have, briefly, we have Connor's the older brother. He's like not seemingly involved. He
Again,
has some shares.
I thought he was going to be like the most well-adjusted one until he's like, I'm going to run for president.
Yeah. Pretty delusional.
And that relationship with Willa. I'm really curious, Portia, to hear your thoughts about.
I just feel like it's not surprising at all. Like, he's paying this woman to have a relationship with him, and it's so, like, and everyone knows.
I know it takes a while before we realize that she is a sex worker, or an escort,
and she's a playwright
and a playwright. But because they were always like, oh, why is Willa here? Oh no, Willa's here again. And I was like, what's up? What's wrong with Willa? Like, is she like a toxic ex, or like why are they upset? And then it comes out, and then you're like, oh
yeah, she's
And then he's like, yeah, I'll like pay for you to
he wants
do your
more,
playwright. He wants more from her.
She's
taking him up on it, but only because he's like footing the bill.
Right.
He's paying for it. So again, it's like all 4 of these children inability to have a secure, authentic relationship. Not only with like a spouse or a romantic partner, but even with children, which so far we only see with Kendall. But also like their friends, they don't really have any like real friends.
No.
It's either like they get something out of you.
And like the old school people who seems like who have been around for a long time. So we have like Jerry who's I think they're like attorney.
Like their in-house legal counsel.
And then Frank, who seems really close with Logan, who is treated poorly and then brought back in and then, tries to take over with Kendall. I mean, it's just like...
Yeah, it's like, you can't keep track.
Like Whiplash or tennis.
Yes,
like who do we like? Who do we not?
Where's the alliance here? And again, with Frank, it's like, why do you keep coming back? It's like all these people come back to Logan, I think, because he has all the power. Portia, we can't wrap up before we talk about the family therapy.
Oh my gosh,
or the faux family therapy.
Such a power move. And so they only did it for optics. So there'd be a family photo, which doesn't
materialize
because Kendall is off the deep end doing meth at a meth house that Roman then picks him up. The therapist dives headfirst into the pool.
First of all, this therapist is the actor who played Nikki in that show, This Is Us. I don't know if you watched that.
No.
Such a good show. Very different from this. But I was like, oh, it's that guy. So he's the therapist. always weird to like fly your therapist to you, but I'm sure rich people do this. And then they're having this like quote unquote family therapy. I liked how like the kids didn't like just participate in the way their dad wanted them to. Like it was such bullshit.
And they finally, I think they took a break and then
they never came back.
So right before the break, Shiv said something like, well, this is bullshit.
Right.
Like, so I'm not going to participate.
Right. And so like I wrote down a couple of key quotes from that I loved. Someone, I think maybe the therapist like starts off with this, or maybe there's a toast at like a breakfast or something, but they say, they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They do not mean to, but they do. They fill you up with faults they had and add a little extra too.
That's great.
What a limerick or whatever. And then
who says that?
I forget. I thought it was the therapist maybe. I'm pretty sure it was to like open the session and like be a little funny or something.
I was like, oh, maybe I should say that.
And then the dad like just saying his party line, such a narcissistic thing to do. And again, I mean, we keep going back to our episodes on You, but it's just such a good show. When we were talking about like if the the Quinn family went to therapy, what would it have been like? I feel like it would have been like this.
Yep.
Except maybe the dad wouldn't have showed up. Like the only reason Logan showed up was to get the photo to like boost his PR image and the stock price. But then the dad's just saying something like, you know, everything I've ever done is for my children and I love them. And that's it. That's like as warm as it gets. There's nothing else. And I wrote down like the therapist is like, well, kids, you know, or whoever, like, what do you think about that? And I think Shiv said, I hear it. And then I think Roman said, big words.
Yeah.
The extent of their reaction. But I loved that they just didn't like play the role that they knew he wanted him to. And then the therapist like dives into the pool and busts his teeth out. And you're like, what family therapist is like swimming around?
Yeah,
it was just like wild.
And Logan is like almost rightfully so, like, what the F? Like, what?
This just exploded in his face. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great depiction of how family therapy shouldn't be, right? Like it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah. But
probably
also
is for
people,
really rich,
you know, can go to therapy and like
totally bullshit.
You often see as a therapist, these dynamics play out so clear as day, right? Like the parent maybe who just like repeats the same thing over and over again, or who's like playing the victim. And then, you know, you see a kid who almost like sadly is really trying. And then the other kids who have just, which, you know,
totally checked out.
Shiv and Roman seem to like, they're just like, I'm not going to throw the stone at myself. I'm not going to throw myself under the bus here.
Right.
Sure.
It's not safe.
Sounds good.
But then so you need to have a therapist who's really in it for the right reasons to be able to like, and I think you also would have to navigate and understand, like, is this even a safe space?
Absolutely.
And like, stop it. Like the ethical thing would have been like, we're not going to continue. I'm going to leave because like, it's not safe. It's clearly an abusive dynamic. Like, they're not safe to be open. And you're just like enabling this awful, awful abusive behavior.
Yep.
Oh, man.
So stay tuned for season 2.
Coming up in 2 weeks.
Yep. We're excited. We've been, you know, diving into the content like crazy. And
it's so good.
I just can't stop watching
I love shows like this.
But like always, make sure that you are following us on Instagram and TikTok at Analyze Scripts Podcast on TikTok, and then at Analyze Scripts on Instagram. And we will have some really exciting guests over the next couple months as well. So stay tuned and check us
some
out.
Lighthearted summer movies coming your way too to sort of break up this sociopathy.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is true. They can. It's surprising where you find these people sometimes. All right. See you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye. This podcast and its contents are a copyright of Analyze Scripts, all rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of part or all of the contents in any form is prohibited. Unless you want to share it with your friends and rate, review, and subscribe. That's fine. All stories and characters discussed are fictional in nature. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, or products is intended or should be inferred. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The podcast and its contents do not constitute professional, mental health, or medical advice. Listeners might consider consulting a mental health provider if they need assistance with any mental health problems or concerns. As always, please call 911 or go directly to your nearest emergency room for any psychiatric emergencies. Thanks for listening and see you next time.